Hello, and welcome to the Road to Autonomy Podcast. I am your host, Grayson Brulte. The Road to Autonomy Podcast is brought to you in part by Florida Internet and Television. It's time to cut the tax on tech. Hello and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. I am your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to have Pradeep Elankumaran, CEO and co-founder of Farmstead. Welcome to the podcast, Pradeep.
Thank you so much for having me, Grayson. I'm very excited to talk to you about Farmstead.
I'm very excited, and I want to point out before we get in there that you don't charge fees, which we're going to get into there, and for the record, is absolutely brilliantly smart. And so I'd like to start with this. What was the inspiration for founding Farmstead?
We founded Farmstead in 2016. My daughter at the time was 2 years old, and she was growing through a growth spurt and eating a lot of food. And I found myself, we were living in a smaller place and the fridge wasn't that big. So I found myself going to supermarkets 3-4 times a week, buying the same things over and over. It was very frustrating. My wife at the time was heavily pregnant with our second on the way, and she had to do the same thing. And if you spend enough time in the Safeways of the world throughout the week, you realize that that experience could be vastly better. It's not just Safeway, it's most supermarkets in general. So we tried a variety of different things. I tried Instacart, and I tried, at the time, Google Shopping Express, and I tried Amazon Fresh, and I tried a whole bunch of other services nearby, and nothing really worked. There were lots of operational issues for the most part that prevented me from getting that perfect order to my doorstep. Or it was too expensive, or there were a lot of substitutions, or there was some packaging hell that I have to go through once the products are ready at my door. And in the end, it was not a very pleasant experience. So I was talking to my now co-founder. We were both working on the Yahoo growth team at the time. And Kevin and I were working very closely together at the time, really figuring out consumer distribution. And I asked Kevin, what would you recommend here if you want to tell a bunch of people in a small radius about a way to get groceries delivered once a week, and we could make it almost like a milkman-like model. And Kevin suggested Nextdoor, so we posted on Nextdoor in Mountain View in the Bay Area, informing customers that were thinking about this, potential customers. And in 2 days, 200 people said yes, which is quite interesting when you are two consumer entrepreneurs trying to explore a new space. And it was interesting, but it was also very disconcerting because it's 15 plus years of e-commerce. Why is it so difficult to get milk delivered to your doorstep? There were milkmen at one point, but they seem to have kind of gone out of fashion. And all these other online grocery experiences weren't really doing the right thing for some reason. They're to the point where 200 people are showing up. So as we started digging in, it became pretty clear that the online grocery industry adoption was very low. So the space itself was about $1 trillion in spend every year. And of that $1 trillion, in 2016, only 3% was online. And that's shocking. This is a greenfield opportunity. It's a greenfield space. No one's working on this. And it's incredibly difficult to get it right, which is why not many people are working on it. And you really were building for the future. And this got us quite excited to start.
You're right about building for the future. A lot of individuals not getting it right. There's no reason if you order Cheerios that they substitute it with Frosted Flakes. It just doesn't make any sense. But as you know from your experience, it's commonplace. Was that one of the main drivers when you posted on Nextdoor that you were able to say, okay, neighbors, we're going to get you quality. It's going to be delivered on time without fuss? Was that one of the main drivers that started that sign up, or just people were just fed up with the services that were offered?
It's a little bit of both. We told customers that we would guarantee the item. That went very far because substitution hell is a whole another thing. Like once you enter it, it's very hard to move away from it. And especially if you have children at home, my daughter drinks a certain kind of milk. And if you tell her that she can't drink that milk, then I have to go to the store.
Yes, you do. And so let's use that example for a minute here. How is the Farmstead model today? You do no substitutes. You get the milk that your daughter likes, you get the milk your daughter likes. The ice cream my daughter likes, we get the ice cream. How is that possible? What is the magic sauce that you're doing this, or is it just an incredible focus on customer service?
Well, 100% no substitutes is near impossible because even if we promise you something, our vendors might not deliver things they promised us, right? So the goal is really to minimize that experience as much as possible and maximize the probability your basket is 100% what you ordered. And we do a very good job. So our approach really is software and a lot of prediction and a lot of very precise control of the data that's entered into our system, which makes the software better. As the software gets better, prediction gets better. As the prediction gets better, your experience gets better.
See, you've got really great software. You've got happy customers because let's say 9 out of 10 times they're getting exactly what they want. And as I mentioned earlier, you don't charge service fees and you don't charge delivery fees. How is this possible?
That's a great question. So we are not picking on top of a supermarket, and that's step one. Supermarkets are not great places to fulfill online grocery orders out of. The supermarket inventory control is quite poor. They generally know that something is supposed to be in the supermarket, but even the people working the floor don't usually know whether it's on the shelf. And you would expect that they would because they have all the tools and digital inventory control, but actually they don't. They don't have a lot of digitized inventory control. And these are mostly, we're talking about probabilities of things showing up inside a particular supermarket or not. So in that environment, it's very difficult to create an experience that customers love. And also, supermarkets are very expensive places to operate in general, and they result in very low net profit for those grocers. So our approach is really let's move away from these supermarkets. Let's spin up smaller warehouses closer to people. When I say smaller, we're talking about 15 to 35,000 square feet locations. And they're not so big that they have to be zoned in a industrial district outside of the city. They're light industrial, so they're usually located close enough to where people live. And inside these warehouses, we have very minimal infrastructure, so mostly cooling, freezing, and shelves for picking ambient products. And what we have a lot more of is software. And the code that we have written over the last 4+ years allows us to orchestrate exactly all the right things that need to happen in order to make online grocery work, not just for our customers, but as for us, the operator.
So is software the magic glue that makes this whole model possible and then it will eventually lead you on the path to profitability?
That's right. It's data and the software that uses the data.
So let's give an example. You're going into a new city, let's just call it New City, and you're looking for space and you're working with the town council or the mayor's office. What is their reaction? Because if you go into a store today where there's shoppers, they run you over, they're aggressive, and it's not a fun shopping experience. You make shopping fun again for the people that want it, but then you're also doing a great service for the people that want to have it delivered. What is the expression from the local governments when you come in and propose this model in their cities?
Massive enthusiasm usually, because supermarkets, as great as they are in being a place where you can go and get food, also contribute to pretty significant food inequality. So over the many decades, supermarkets have become and retained and stayed popular rather. You realize that they only really service a particular geographic radius. Right? So there are pockets of geography in most major metro areas that are not easily served by supermarkets, not easily accessible to supermarkets. And as a result, folks in those places don't get to have fresh food as often. And they have to go through some serious pain just to get to a store. When we open a new location, we have a continuous radius that we cover, and that radius only expands over time. We usually start with about 10 to 15 miles outside the location. And in that entire radius, we cover every single household. So this ever expanding radius means that every part of whatever we are delivering to gets coverage uniformly, irrespective of demographic reasons or housing reasons or income reasons or geography reasons. And that's a huge win for any metro area that gets a Farmstead location.
It's an incredible win. So if there's an example, there's a single mother with 2 kids that lives in a different part of town, not near the grocery store, where she can get fresh produce or fresh vegetables for her children. She could go on the Farmstead app and have that freshness delivered to her house, so her children could have a wholesome meal.
That's right. And not just to her house, but our drivers deliver to her and to her neighbors at the same time, usually grouped together in more sustainable ways. So it's extremely eco-friendly. And that same driver might be driving another 15 minutes and delivering to a completely different neighborhood and also delivering to 4 or 5 people there at the same time.
It's powerful because you've got a great business model, but you're also doing good by society. And we talked about markets a minute ago, but you're expanding into Miami now. It seems like everybody's expanding into Miami. I've been in Florida now for a couple of years, and everybody's coming down here, which is awesome. But why Miami? What was it about Miami that you decided, listen, we're going to expand Farmstead there?
Miami is a very unique market. I think that's a good way of describing it is, when you're thinking about all of the major metropolitan areas in the US, a lot of them share commonalities, but the differences are more amplified usually. And I think has a lot more in common with most other metro areas than places like Chicago and New York or San Francisco that are just drastically different from each other, right? Two, the geography of Miami really is conducive because we can, given the way that the city is laid out and kind of hugs the coast, that entire county region is accessible no matter where we put a location. And on top of that, just from a mass market customer adoption base, Miami is one of those classic mass market grocery cities. There isn't a specific skew towards people buying upmarket Whole Foods types, or they're trying to be more value conscious, working with the Walmarts of the world primarily. So they're generally going to, for example, the Publixes of the world, and sometimes they go to Trader Joe's, sometimes they go to Walmart, sometimes they go to Whole Foods. So more representative out of the other parts of the country as well. And at the same time, there's of course that bent from the Spanish speaking crowd's influence in that specific parts of the city, and how we tend to support multiple demographics even within a particular region. So that makes the entire SKU selection process a bit more interesting as we scale up. So there's a lot of work we're doing, especially for Miami. That's quite intriguing.
Are you getting local products that are popular in Miami and putting those into your system that the residents are used to getting from their store, since there's certain potentially Cuban products, you're putting more of those in there versus another market just because of the demand demographics?
Definitely. So we do have that as part of the model no matter where we go, irrespective of whether Miami or other places. Whenever possible, the goal of Farmstead on a supply side is to carry local as much as we can, right? So especially during seasonal times. In the Bay Area, for example, the Bay Area is blessed with 24/7, 12 months of the year, high quality produce grown very close to the Bay Area. So of course, they don't grow tomatoes in the winter, but in the summer, when tomatoes are available in the Bay Area, we tend to prioritize acquiring product from those farms that are grown nearby. And the same in Miami, right? Whatever's local, whatever folks are used to, we will purchase. And then we also sell the big national brands as well. And whatever the local non-perishables are that are extremely popular, we usually tend to carry those as well.
You mentioned hugs the coast. Are we going to see Farmstead boat deliveries in Miami, since they've all the great waterways? You can go into Brickell, you can save the traffic going to South Beach. Are we going to see Farmstead boat deliveries next?
Never say never. I think there's always new modes of transport that, at the least I would like to encounter. I've definitely driven as a Farmstead delivery driver, and I would probably be one of the first Farmstead boat drivers when we get to that point.
It'll be a great billboard. You get all this great exposure. What is this? Well, we're delivering fresh food. Okay, here's the app. Download it, and away you go. Because if you look at the grocery spaces, you mentioned it's $1 trillion market. It's a highly competitive space, so you have to find ways to stand out. So I'll go on the record and tell you I think the boat thing is a great idea, because then you can bring it up here to Palm Beach and deliver us food. Amazon and their growing grocery ambitions, are they a threat to Farmstead?
I think let's take a step back here and understand the market in a bit more of a nuanced way, right? So we're looking at $1 trillion space. 10% of those customers are Whole Foods customers, and they're by Amazon customers at the moment. There's another 15%-ish that's Walmart customers, and they can essentially budget only for Walmart and Aldi, Asda, Lidl, and so on. The remaining 70+% are what we call mid-market customers and mass market customers. These are folks who go to Publix, Safeway, Kroger. They definitely go to Trader Joe's if there's one available. And sometimes they go to Walmart or Aldi or Lidl. And sometimes they go to Whole Foods. For these customers, it's extremely important that whatever option they're using for online grocery helps them stick to their weekly budget. And their weekly budget is substantial. It's usually $100 to $150 a week. And most online grocery services have not been helping this particular 70+% segment of customers, and instead have been biasing towards folks who can afford to trade money for time, right? And the majority of the country can't do that. I definitely can't do that either. So the goal is really to build utility-like systems that permit mass market shoppers to rely on an online grocery service, just like they rely on the supermarkets that service their neighborhood. Now, talking about Amazon and Walmart, Amazon and Walmart have always been competing, and they will continue to compete at the e-commerce level. But in online grocery, what they're specifically competing for is a bigger percentage of that 70% mass market customer. So the push from Amazon is really to go down market. The push from Walmart is to go up market. And the 70% may shrink to 50 to 60% over the next few years. And COVID adoption is generally spurring that for sure. And for us, we compete in the space more like an Amazon with technology, but do operate primarily attracting mass market customers. So we don't have to go up market or down market because we are already mass market experience. And as a result, we have a significant leg up, not just in terms of technology that we are rolling out, but also the ways in which we market to those customers and attract them.
Then you have, to me, is the 10,000 pound elephant in the room that's going to do something at some point is Costco. Does Costco enter the online grocery space at some point?
I can't predict what Costco is going to do, but Costco's historically been very focused on a certain set of economics out of a certain set of behavior patterns. The model works when customers show up to your warehouse and they pick directly out of pallets and they pay you a membership fee. Now, I'm sure there is an adjustment to the model that'll get you somewhere. But I think every grocer in the US right now is very exposed to companies like us and others that can move laterally, can attract customers in ways that they have never had to before. I spent some time at Lyft, and the general consensus for technology-driven operations companies is you market online. When you market online, you don't have to have a location that's right on Main Street. You don't have to send flyers to people's doorsteps or circulars with discounts. You reach them on Instagram and Facebook and Nextdoor and any digital channel you can get your hands on. So those channels tend to be where the fight's going to be had moving forward. And they're actually very difficult to work on, honestly, getting good performance on these channels. But the companies that tend to do well there have a disproportionate probability of attracting lots and lots of people.
When you look to attract people, is one of the things that attracts your customers is a weekly budget and then the reusable packaging. So you're getting the eco-friendly crowd. That's a very large percentage of the market. Now, is that one of the main drivers that's driving the conversions for you to growth?
The eco-friendly does matter. I think the weekly program really ties nicely with this weekly behavior, right? So our weekly program is very straightforward. When you show up the first time as a customer, we ask you to place an order for delivery that same day. But once you get that delivery, we tell you, look, you had a perfect delivery. Now you can get this once a week on your schedule, whatever you want. You don't have to pay a subscription fee. You don't have to pay a delivery fee. You will get subscribe and save on these products because you're telling us ahead of time what you kind of want, and we will use that to offset efficiencies on our end to give you better prices over time. And we will give you a delivery to doorstep very consistently. That's not late. And that delivery is usually delivering to you and to other people in your neighborhood. So this model is extremely attractive. And one of the big key facets here is we take your packaging back, right? So you don't have to break down boxes and bags and figure out what to do. You take all the stuff out of the boxes or the bags and you just leave them out again. And next week when we deliver, we'll grab the packaging, take it back. If there's any bottles that you need to return, we'll give you the bottle deposit back. And we'll just make life a lot easier for you because we can. And that does go very far. Now, specifically about packaging, it does matter what kind of packaging you use. Like just making, a sea of styrofoam show up at your door is not conducive, right? It is important to make sure that you don't burn your hand on dry ice all day and you're using more sustainable packaging. And, we all have over the last 12 months have gotten enough boxes at our door that we're all kind of sick and tired of box breakdown. But going from boxes that need to be broken down in horrible ways to something that's a bit more sustainable goes far. And having the ability to return the box or recycle it, whichever you choose, goes far. Having limited packaging inside the box to make sure that your products are fresh and clean, and at the same time, not subject to temperature constraints. Like, for example, make sure that basil isn't touching the dry ice and it accidentally gets frozen, right? But your ice cream is actually touching the dry ice and it stays frozen. These things we care a lot about, but we have to do all of it while minimizing the sheer amount of packaging that goes into these boxes. And wherever possible, we use compostable produce bags. And that goes very far too, because then you can take, whatever vegetables or fruits out of those bags and then use them for your compost bins if you live in an area and you're lucky enough to live in an area that supports composting. So we have built these systems over the years that really merge nicely with people's existing workflows, and it does contribute a lot to the good vibes that we get from folks as we expand.
Is the packaging different in, say, the Northeast versus the Southeast versus the Southwest, where you have different weather patterns, where if you're going to deliver ice cream in Florida in the middle of August, I got to hope you got a lot of ice in there or it's going to melt. Or if you're going to deliver something that can't get frozen in the Northeast in the winter, did you change the packaging depending on the climates?
We probably will, but not the core packaging. I think the quantities of ice do change throughout the seasons and depending on the temperature. So in the Bay Area in the summer, we have more ice in the bags or boxes depending on weather. Ice cream staying frozen, that does matter quite a bit, right? Irrespective of where you live. Like we never want the ice cream to be squishy when it shows up. That's just the worst experience, and people immediately get angry, and I would too if if ice cream showed up at my door, right? So going back to what the regional differences are, I think the crux of the market of the packaging should really be: is it recyclable? Is it returnable? And then regional variances to support some geographic restrictions or weather restrictions do matter. But overall, I think we have a pretty scalable model here that would take us quite far.
Walmart's also getting into the space with their home valet pilot. Do you view that as a threat? Do you view that as an innovation that the industry might adopt, so the individual can have it on their doorstep if they live in a home and you can put the stuff in there and it keeps it cool? Do you see that becoming a trend or a threat, or where do you see that going?
And I hope it doesn't become a trend, because it's really the operator's problem to solve, not the customers. Right? The reality is all of these other entities that are doing online grocery are trying very hard to make the economics work in their favor, and are trying to, for example, not introduce a packaging cost and instead have a driver show up with limited refrigerated packaging or refrigerated vans and just drop it off to your door. And now you take on the responsibility as a customer to keep the thing cold. Seems kind of weird to me, right? I think the goal should be that the operator who is bringing you the food should be the one responsible for keeping it cold all the way to whenever you decide to open your door and grab it, right? So we do unattended delivery, and from the moment the food is packed to the moment it gets to your doorstep, it's fully temperature controlled. And when it gets to your doorstep, it remains cold for many hours afterwards. This is something we do. Like the ice cream will remain cold even if it's sitting at your doorstep for 3+ hours and you're just not home. And we don't need you to be home.
You mentioned pickers and that your stuff is manually picked. Walmart's now doing automated picking. Are the individuals on your company, and I want to point out that they are employees, they're not 1099 contractors, so hat tip to you on that one. Is it the drivers that are doing the whole, they're picking it out, getting in the vehicle and taking it through, or is there dedicated pickers that put it into the vehicles, or how does that operate?
Well, our picking is actually a production line. So similar to other e-commerce entities, we are managing the perishability of these products at these warehouses. But outside of that, we tend to skew pretty heavily towards the well understood picking methods of e-commerce with our own software, of course. Now, it's not our drivers doing the picking. Our drivers show up after scheduling themselves in for a particular shift. And by the time they show up, their bag should be ready for them to go.
Following the e-commerce trends, will you eventually move into automated picking?
It's definitely an area of consideration, but not anytime soon, because we got to take the marketing away from the actual operations, right? So if you are a grocer and you are definitely growing recently, but prior to COVID was in a pretty tough spot, and Amazon's breathing down their neck, and so is Walmart, then you have to make some moves, show the market that's trading your public stock that you actually have a good handle on efficiency gains that are coming up. Automation gives you efficiency gains, but that's the extent of which you can really drive the conversation. So a traditional supermarket, if you do manual picking of an online grocery order, somewhere between 100 to 150 delivery slots a day. Now, this is actually a shockingly low number because when Farmstead Hub opens up, it's usually minimum thousands of orders per day in delivery capacity, right? But remember back in shelter in place times when everyone was trying to place an online grocery order, and I'm sure you had this experience where you open the app and you realize there's no delivery slots for many days. There's just no slots at all. And you probably assumed that I showed up too late today to get my delivery slot. I should wake up earlier tomorrow to place that order. The reality was there were no delivery slots to begin with. Because if you have 100 to 150 delivery slots per store, and there are 50,000 stores in the country, that's 7.5 million delivery slots for 138 million households, not uniformly distributed. So that's way less than 10%. You had no shot of even getting a delivery slot. So now adding robotics into your warehouse gets you a little bit better. You can probably get to like 400 or 500. If you're lucky, you'll get to like 700, 800, but not much more, right? So, okay, multiply that, so you're getting like a 5x increase. A decent dent in that particular problem of do we have enough delivery slots? But then the other part of this, your customers still have to show up and shop with you. I think Walmart has a higher probability of those customers showing up because Walmart customers, unlike other grocers expecting that behavior, Walmart customers actually stay loyal to Walmart. And I think it's a great move. But for other grocers, it's definitely a risky one. And honestly, the delivery capacity problem, the fact that you can get much better margins operating out of warehouses once you figure out the technology pieces like we have, it's almost a moot point. Why would you even want to do these kind of operations out inside stores? And the answer is typically, well, we have been doing stores for decades. How can we move away from stores?
To me, I like your model for a variety of reasons. One, I don't like going to a grocery store and having to fight with a shopper to get what I'm looking for. It's a horrible experience. And you get your ankles run over 9 out of 10 times because they're in a rush. And I look at this whole thing, and I have a dear friend of mine, and we talk a lot about packaging, and he was in the restaurant industry. I don't understand. Amazon's got the balance sheet to do what I'm about to describe to you. To close down the size of the Whole Foods stores, make them smaller, and make a dedicated area just for pickers and packers. You have all the data, you know where they're going, and let the shoppers have the shopping experience. Am I crazy to think that, or is that where this is going to have to go, or is it going to have to go to warehouses? Because going into a store and competing with shoppers is not the future. It's not a great experience, and I don't even want to go to that store. And I'll let this store remain anonymous. There's one by my house. I won't go to it anymore because 9 out of 10 people are the pickers and not the people that are shopping there, and it's a horrible experience. And so they lost my business. Just they embrace yours more.
Despite that, despite what you just saw, you're still only capping at 150 orders a day, which is challenging, right? So I think the answer to your question is what do you believe in terms of adoption speed, right? Because if you believe that going from a current 7 to 10% online grocery adoption after shelter in place, starting to kind of like come down to the next 30-40% online adoption is going to happen in the next 3 years, then yeah, you absolutely have to invest in better delivery capacity environments. But if you think it's a much slower burn, then you will be a bit slower as the operator of these stores. Because store margins matter a lot. Store margins, there was an article in The Economist recently about what's going on in the UK. And that was a pretty horrific article, but it's actually worse in the US. And what they outlined is your store volume of people walking in the stores is actually dropping, and your online ordering volume is increasing, which is exactly what you described. However, online orders are deeply unprofitable relative to in-store shopping orders. So the store's margins are dramatically affected, and the next order of business for any supermarket that's running a store whose margins are eroding rapidly is really to control those margins. And it's less about improving the delivery capacity or the product experience for those customers. They may be side effects for it, right?
Sometimes you just got to bite the bullet and invest in the future, because if you don't, you're going to end up out of business. You're going to be extinct like the dinosaurs. That's going to happen. The consumer is shifting to online grocery delivery. The train has left the station. There's no coming back. It might be a 10, 20-year return, but you have to make the investment today to capture it, or somebody like yourself is going to come up, and the next thing you know, you're a $5-6 billion company and you're acquiring them because you clean their clock. And I'll give you a lot of credit for outmaneuvering them and embracing the future. I do want to know, Why is there a lack of delivery slots? Is it a lack of drivers? What causes the lack of delivery slots?
It's very hard to do production lines inside supermarket stores because they're set up for retail. So it's one picker, maybe if you're lucky, doing 3 or 4 orders at the same time, but usually doing one order walking through the store, just like you would, right, for yourself. And it's also one delivery driver delivering to a house an hour. That's it. So we don't do either of those. We do a production line for picking and we do a batch delivery to you and to your neighbors. And that gets you pretty far. Right? And we can do that because we don't operate in a supermarket. It's conceptually very straightforward. And of course, there's a lot of nuance tied to the actual code that we are shipping. But that's generally the big difference.
Not operating a supermarket gives you a competitive advantage for the ways you describe, but I'm going to give you another thing why it gives you a competitive advantage. I'm the guy that likes to go to the chicken guy, to go to the butcher, to go to the specialty shops to get certain items and talk to that. As you scale, are you going to incorporate some of those specialty butchers and poultry places where you can only get this beef or this chicken through Farmstead and you become that distributor for that? Do you see that as you start to scale, starting to add on those different unique products that you can't get in a grocery store? You can only get from specialty stores?
Absolutely, and it's a function of how many people are attached to that delivery location, right? So as more and more people show up, then the probability that a case of this unique cut of beef that you normally don't see at stores will sell is higher, and then it's a data problem, right? So can we buy more products that exhibit that characteristic? Something that people will probably buy, but not, when you have 100 customers tied to that warehouse, but when you have 1,000 customers tied to that warehouse, and you just keep finding more and more of those extremely unique products and keep them flowing through the location. And it's funny because when we first started, one of the big complaints was from people we were trying to get interest from is really, well, you don't carry everything, and because of that, people will not show up. And we're actually seeing the opposite. We don't carry everything, and as a result, people are showing up because selection no longer matters. Curation matters a lot more, and your ability as a grocer to offer multiple price points and therefore reduce the need to go to multiple stores every single week matters significantly more, right? So if you can save you hours of time every week, and we can give you the same prices as the stores, if not lower, and we can build compelling digital products that allow you to get stuff to your doorstep on essentially autopilot and still give you all the flexibility in the world and free delivery, why wouldn't you use it, right? So especially as the customer base increases, we keep adding more and more products that are very relevant to their needs.
Do you ever get to a point where your warehouses where you have too many SKUs and you say, listen, it's not good, based on the data, it's not going to work when we go over a certain amount of SKUs, or could you go to unlimited SKUs based on the demand of the market?
Unlimited SKUs is probably not wise because there's always long tail behavior, right? I think the goal is to have high throughput of the products that are rolling through. So we should never carry something that it takes a whole month to sell one case of it, right? Usually we move through multiple cases on a 2 or 3 day basis for most products, sometimes a lot more for things like bananas and so on, right? So our goal is really to find that sweet spot on a per product basis. But since our technology does all of the prediction, there are actually no people at Farmstead deciding how much of any product to bring in. It's all done with code. And this is a pretty significant difference from a supermarket. Is that a supermarket, there's for every 2 or 3 aisles, there is a person who's deciding how much of any quantity to bring in. They're actually walking and managing it manually. That's one, a total waste of time. And two, will not help you if you are growing your customer base week over week, because let's take basil, for example. Basil is extremely perishable and extremely expensive wholesale product. Any respectable supermarket will have basil. You will not, as a shopper, typically buy basil, fresh basil, every single week, unless you really like pesto, right? So, but the weeks in which you want to make pesto or Thai fried rice or whatever else uses basil, you will show up. Now, how much basil should a company like Farmstead carry? Because instead of us operating a supermarket and turning that basil that doesn't sell into some other dish that does sell, we have to actually precisely predict how much basil to carry. Otherwise, it goes to waste. So our machine learning models predict exactly how much to carry so that when you show up tomorrow to buy basil, we have it available for you, but not so much that it goes to waste. And in the scenario we mispredict, and you are not able to find that basil when you tap that add to cart, next week we take that little bit of data that we now know that someone tried to buy basil and didn't get it, and put it into our machine learning model, and then it buys more basil, reducing the probability of a stock up.
You're creating the ideal experience for a customer, and then you're also eliminating waste. But if from a customer standpoint, this is an absolute no-brainer. So I got to ask, what are the best-selling items on Farmstead?
Bananas,
Wow.
typically. Bananas. I mean, bananas are the number one selling product all across the country. So that's always the case. And then it's right after that is milk of various kinds.
Oh, people like their potassium. I would have no idea that bananas would sell that well.
We also sell smoothie bananas, which you don't see marked up as a store as smoothie bananas. But we know that there's a market for smoothie bananas, and these bananas that we might not sell are going to ripen up, and there's definitely people who want exactly that. So instead of throwing them out, we say smoothie bananas. They're just as good. They're just perfectly right for you. We're not going to sell you like horrible bananas. And you show up, but make sure you put them in your smoothies. And since we know your purchase behavior, we are working on interesting new features. For example, we've been talking about this feature called Eat This Next, which will tell you, let's say you bought fresh fish. You should probably eat the fish before anything else, right? So we'll tell you, you just bought fresh fish, so eat this first. Don't eat the other things. The other things can wait. Don't waste the food that you already paid money for.
Smart. And it's smart. For the smoothie bananas, I like to make banana bread, so I can use those for banana bread. So you might have to change the branding there, but you're really onto something of understanding the food and understanding your customers. And we're going to see a lot of trends that are going to start to emerge. And there's all these things, if you listen to CNBC or Bloomberg, where, we're in the roaring 20s, we're in the roaring 20s. And now the big thing in the roaring 20s are saying is that automation is going to continue to dominate. At some point, do you adopt your model to autonomous vehicle delivery services?
We probably will, but I think the market's still a little bit behind for last mile in that way. One of the challenges we found, we've definitely done some trial runs with autonomous vehicles. The big challenge is not the transport of that last mile from our warehouse to that doorstep. The big challenge is what happens after, right? Because the best experience is an unattended delivery. But autonomous vehicles can't easily do unattended delivery right now. There's some modes where a vehicle shows up to your door and then a smaller vehicle takes something else from their bigger vehicle and drops it off at your step. Seems kind of convoluted at the moment, but the best experience would be you're showing up at the door expecting an attended delivery and something's there for you to go outside and grab. And yeah, we may get to that eventually. And there's a lot more R&D that needs to happen before we start digging in from a consumer experience standpoint. And it all comes down to the customer experience for us. It's not about the shiny technology, which is why even robotics inside the warehouse is a lot less relevant until it gets to a point where we have so many orders that it's much more efficient to do it with robotics, much more precise. That's when we would pull the trigger on both of these kind of automations.
You're focused on customer experience. You're doing really good things for incredible amounts of people all over the United States. And I'll go on the record again and I'll say I think your model is the future of delivery for grocery. I can't wait till you come to Palm Beach County to start this service because I don't have to keep going to my specialty stores and the grocery stores because I'm going to have it in the Farmstead app. So I'm excited about that. Taking all of this into mind, what does the future look like for Farmstead?
Thank you for the kind words. I think the path we are on is essentially one that's very distinct than what you normally see. Supermarkets are not easily scalable things. You have to spend a lot of money and you have to wait a long period of time for them to open, and then they don't make profits for many years after. Our locations are a lot easier to spin up and scale up. And any market we open, from the day we get keys in hand, we can get a delivery to your doorstep in about 3 weeks from the first day we get access to the space. And that's compelling. And it costs a lot less than a supermarket to open these locations. So over the next 12 months, we're really looking to grow the footprint of Farmstead and make it accessible to the majority of the people in the country. And then afterwards, we start filling in the gaps everywhere else. So pretty soon, I'm hoping you will see a Farmstead brand pop up in your Facebook or Instagram feed.
I'm excited. What are the next markets that, if you publicly disclose what markets that you're going to next?
Yeah, so we've talked about a few, and I can't share the rest, but we definitely are going to Raleigh right after this, and then Nashville, then Miami. And we have a few more markets that will get announced shortly.
Oh, good. I'm looking for those announcements. I'm really excited. And Pradeep, as we look up to wrap up this extremely insightful conversation, what would you like our listeners to take away with them?
Well, I think the most compelling thing we can talk about really is the future of getting food to your table, right? I think we've all been part of an experience over decades that stretches into our family history, right? And now there's a moment where we may need to break that and move to a new reality that where you may not be the person teaching your children how to pick avocados at the supermarket. And you may wind up being the person telling them, like, use this one particular service or another. Here's the characteristics of a good avocado once they show up at your door. And it's a future that I think that we should welcome because it gives us a lot more than what we had before. And it saves us time and saves us money and gives both back to us that we didn't have before. So we are very excited to bring that model to doorsteps, and we would want all of your listeners to give us a try.
If the listeners want to give you a try, where can they go to learn more about Farmstead and sign up if it's available in their market?
Go to farmsteadapp.com, and very soon you can open your phones and search for the app, but not right away. The moment, start at the website.
Awesome. So if you really want great food delivered in a really great way and you want to do good, download the Farmstead app because I'm sure it's an absolutely wonderful experience. And as we've heard on today's podcast, the future is online grocery delivery. The future is bright. The future is autonomy. And the future is online grocery in Farmstead. Thank you so much, Pradeep.
Thank you so much for having me. Had a blast.
Thank you for listening to the Road to Autonomy podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter at Road to Autonomy or email podcast@brulteco.com. The Road to Autonomy is produced by Brulte & Company. The views and opinions expressed on the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Brulte & Company. The content discussed in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as legal, tax, investment, or business advice.